Howard Beck joins the podcast. We're going to talk about whether the Celtics can take anything from this series against the Hawks and apply it as they move forward. We'll talk about Derrick White. And, of course, we'll dump on Trae Young a little bit. It's all right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and I'm here for you every day with a free, fresh podcast dropped directly to your device if you're a subscriber, so make sure you are subscribed on any app you decide to use, whichever app, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever one you want. It's there. It's also on YouTube, so you can come watch the show, hop into the comment section, join the conversation. I'm John Karalis. I used to play ball once upon a time. Now I cover the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal, and I've written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. Today on the show, Howard Beck, who you might have heard on all the national podcasts, ESPN's podcasts, all of them. He joins the show to talk about games 1 and 2, kind of big picture stuff. Later on, we'll talk about the role players. We'll talk about whether the Celtics want to see Golden State, whether the Celtics want to see the Lakers, talk about all of that. We get into a Derrick White conversation, and we start with the big picture. All right, what can the Celtics take out of this Hawk series? There's really not much to take. By the way, tomorrow's show, I'll do a mailbag. Let's do a mailbag tomorrow. Let's wrap it up with a mailbag. Send your questions into johnkaralis.com/mailbag. johnkaralis.com/mailbag. Get your questions in. I'll answer them tomorrow. So that's how we'll wrap up the week. And then Friday night will obviously be a post-game podcast after game 3. So let's get into our conversation here with Howard Beck. It is a big day for us here. Howard Beck, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining the podcast.
Doing well. Thanks for the kind welcome, John. Appreciate it.
I will say that I'm not going to say this is exactly why you're on this podcast and doing the Locked On podcast, but I'm not saying it. As soon as Zach Lowe stopped using niche podcasting as part of his intro to you, you were like, you know what? No, I got to be part of niche podcasting. So let's drill it down. Let's go to the teams. Pretty soon we'll do like player podcasts about individual players, not like player podcasts. We're just going to do like Locked On Derrick White, just a whole podcast about Derrick White, and you'll be that's your next
hyper niche podcasting.
Just drill it all the way down.
How far away are we from that becoming the reality, right? We're just, and welcome to your daily dose of Marcus Smart. Like
I'm telling you,
that's a little frightening. I mean, at some point, so there, like the demand is there somehow, right?
We've had like LeBron Wire USA Today. We've done ESPN has done an entire LeBron. Why not? Why not have
ESPN? Yeah.
Why not have a podcast directly dedicated to? Did I just stumble onto an idea? Did I just stumble onto my $1 million idea? I got to pitch this.
You should build it out and send it to David Locke, and this will be your own little fiefdom within the Locked On network. Locked On, fill in the blank player name goes here. Locked on minutia. The Locked On Minutia network.
I'd say any idea before my second cup of coffee is null and void. I reserve the right to reject my own ideas. All right, let's talk about the team. Let's talk about this Celtics team. Let's start with the biggest question I have. After 2 games, Howard, does it look like the Hawks have any chance of doing anything in this series more than winning an outlier shooting game?
No. I mean, nothing has happened to change my perceptions going in, which was I got put on the spot on NBA radio recently. I was co-hosting with Brian Geltzeiler before, I think it was the morning the playoffs were starting. I think, yeah. So last Saturday morning. And I got last minute, hey, let's predict all the series. Okay. And I hadn't done the exercise yet. So I was just madly penciling it all out. And I said Celtics in 4, but I also had like Sixers in 5. And immediately some cranky Hawks fan was like, how come you're giving the Nets one game and you're not giving the Hawks any? And, well, the Celtics are a lot better than the Sixers. And the Nets are, if not as high on the highest end of the talent spectrum, just better overall depth, and they play some why am I justifying this now today, John? I don't know. I'm just saying as a point of reference, I think the only series that I decided on the fly to predict as a sweep was Celtics Hawks. And look, a lot of that is just because I find the Hawks maddening. Maybe I'm taking it out on them a little bit. They're a team that has underachieved to my eye the last 2 seasons. In the abstract, and this happens in the NBA, right? The talent doesn't always equal success. It doesn't always translate. A team is not always the better than the sum of its parts. These things happen. Chemistry matters. The fit matters. Whether your franchise star actually, engenders some feelings of camaraderie from his teammates also matters. Might be an issue in Atlanta. It might.
Sure.
And so all these things, we know they don't defend well. We know that for a team that has DeJounte Murray, who's become a decent 3-point shooter, and a team with Trae Young, who's supposed to be a great 3-point shooter, they don't really shoot a lot of threes or make a lot of threes. They're shooting more, I believe, under Quinn Snyder than they were under Nate McMillan, if I recall. But they just don't seem to have that, whatever that magical element is that binds a team together. And it's not that they don't have some talent and some guys who can defend and some guys who can shoot. It just, the fit isn't there. And I just, if I don't trust a team's chemistry, if I'm looking at you and saying like you're perpetually underachieving, then yeah. And besides it, the Celtics, I think, are really that good. I know that there were some doubts about them along the way, and some spots where it looked like things were kind of coming apart for a time here and there. I never thought this would be much of a series.
I just want to let you know, this is a safe space. You can go a little more all in on Trae Young if you want. Here.
Hawks fans aren't listening.
I mean, at this point, I don't think any of them are even hate listening. They're just kind of resigned.
They're all listening to Locked On Trae.
That's right.
Their daily dose of Trae.
Yeah. So I wanted to make a Trae Young joke there, but again, I haven't had my second cup of coffee. It's just sitting right here in front of me, and I haven't had. So I'll dub that in later. But I've been in agreement with the player poll that came out in The Athletic that Trae Young's the most overrated player in the league. I know what he's done. I know what he's capable of, but I also know what he's doing. I see the numbers. I see him against no matter who it is. He can't even torch Sam Hauser in these games. And to Sam's credit, and I said it in my podcast yesterday, he's been playing passable defense, and that allows him to stay on the floor in games like this and allows the Celtics to just kind of keep Grant Williams in mothballs until they need him against Philly and Milwaukee. But I mean, Trae Young is supposed to win that matchup. Yeah. He's supposed to win. He's supposed to at least play even against Derrick White. And Derrick White has been roasting everybody. So all of this is to say, Trae Young is a real disappointment. And a couple of seasons ago, when he said, "I'm bored with the regular season," in not so many words, I was like, you know what? I'm out on this guy, because you made one run to the finals. It was kind of a fluky run. And now you're not ready to put in the work that it takes to get back there. No wonder the Hawks have been disappointing the past 2 years. That aside.
No, it's an alarming thing from a young star. That's an alarming thing to hear. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm in agreement. I'm glad that someone who's not as close to the team kind of feels the same way. I just don't think the matchup is right. So I guess the other big picture question I have is, after this is done in 4 or 5, is there anything the Celtics can take out of a series like this and move forward? Or is a series like this almost detrimental when you're getting ready to face the Sixers and presumably the Bucks? Much more with Howard Beck coming up here, including the Derrick White conversation, and later on conversations about the future, the role players, and all of that. First, let's talk about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure Every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit. Or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride! Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, John. Detrimental might be a stretch even for me, and I say even for me because I kind of like I like playing out those kind of kind of just reversing the framework a little bit. So like I appreciate the thought process there, and also in part because, listen, let's face it, the NBA, especially ever since they went to best of 7 in the first round back in like 2002, 3, whenever they made the switch, there really is very little suspense in the first round when it's 1s and 8s, 2s and 7s. Like those matchups are they're fait accompli. And it's frustrating to me because I feel like if we're going to go through the exercise, if we're going to have, I understand why 16 teams make the playoffs. I understand why we have a best of 7 first round. I understand that money is the
right.
end results of all of this. Is the influence on all of this. The playoffs are supposed to be a testing ground. They're supposed to actually be an exercise in which you have at least some belief that the outcome could go either way. And you just don't have it. The 3-6 maybe occasionally is an upset. The 4-5 is not even an upset if a 5 upsets a 4. But you have very, very rarely do you have suspense. And I understand I'm saying this in a year where we have a lot of suspense in the West, right? The West is weird this year because the Lakers could upset the Grizzlies. And initially I thought the Warriors could upset the Kings and they're imploding. And actually I wanted to ask you something about that in a second, related back to the Celtics. And yeah, the Nuggets are probably getting through, but that's the thing. Like the 1-8s in particular, and often the 2-7s just feel like there is no suspense whatsoever. Is it detrimental? Is a step beyond where I would normally go. I don't think so. If you get, obviously injury, that could be a detriment.
Sure.
Is it going to get you out of rhythm? No, I don't think so. Is it going to make you feel, are you going to get softer around the edges because your first round opponent was too easy? I don't think there's much evidence of that over the course of years, but I think it's actually worth thinking about. I wonder what coaches would say who have had rollover first rounds with teams that had the highest aspirations, right? When you're a team like the Celtics that's been to the finals and you're coming back the next year and you're starting your postseason run with a walkover, would you be better off with a bye week? I kind of think not. I think if nothing else, you can fine tune some things. You don't have to expend quite as much energy, probably. So I think, look, get in the rhythm, stay healthy, maybe test out a couple things along the way and try to draw something positive out of it in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I always compare it, the regular listeners know what I'm about to say, it's to the, you're seeing a junk ball pitcher for 7 innings and all of a sudden in the 8th inning, a fireballer comes out of the bullpen and that first fastball looks like it's 125 miles an hour. And you're like, what am I swinging at? Yeah. And, maybe it doesn't have an impact. Maybe it's just the first quarter of the next game and you realize you got to snap back into it. Or maybe there's none, but it just feels like when, and maybe it's just situational. Maybe it's just because the Celtics have shown this propensity for playing down and for getting comfortable, and the worst place for this Celtics team to be is comfortable because that's when they slip. And maybe that's just a human nature thing for anyone. Whenever you're the most comfortable, that's when you aren't on guard. And I call it burnt pizza games because when I was growing up, I grew up at my dad's pizza place. And when it was busy, you never forgot a pizza in the oven. But when somebody called at 2:30 and was the only pizza going on, you put it in, then you go start cleaning up, and next thing you know, person comes in 25 minutes later, and you're like, oh, I have a hockey puck in the oven for you. Let me make a new one for you and give it away for you. So these are like my burnt pizza type of games where I feel like there's the Celtics, you get too comfortable. So I'd like to, this is why I liked game 2, actually, because unlike game 1, they didn't have that 30-point halftime lead. They had to work for a 20-point lead, and the Hawks made a run. DeJounte Murray was hot, and DeAndre Hunter got hot, and guys like the Hawks made a run like an NBA team is supposed to, and the Celtics had to keep grinding and keep making plays and rebuild a 22-point lead. And you see Tatum making that cross-court pass to Horford and reading the play and understanding all of that. That's not something that was done in the second half, really, of game 1. So that kind of is to my point of the Celtics being engaged versus kind of coasting through.
Okay, so I've no doubt in my mind that the Celtics are fully focused on the Hawks, but I also have no doubt in my mind that they have some members of their staff who are focusing on the Sixers, right, and getting ready for that. So they can plan while still concentrating on the task at hand at that level. The players, obviously, you're just immersed in it. I think a team like the Celtics that has been together for a while and that has been on deep playoff runs multiple times and most recently just went to the finals less than a year ago, I would have less concern about the idea that they're being lulled into some sense of complacency, right? And I understand, like, this is a team that has been prone to some complacency in game with too big of a lead, but that happens to almost every dominant team. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know that they're any more or less guilty of that than other powerhouses I've seen over the years. But since we're skipping ahead, this is the question I wanted to ask you. Let me skip way ahead.
Skip way ahead, okay.
Because you're in Boston and I'm not, and you have a Boston Celtics niche podcast that in which you're far more in touch with the vibe of Celtics fans. So I'm curious if you have a sense of this. Do Celtics fans, are they enjoying some sense of whether Schadenfreude's the wrong term for this? Are they enjoying the Warriors self-immolating right now? Down 0-2, Draymond suspended for game 3, or do Celtics fans, forget what the Celtics want, who cares what the players and the team want? Would Celtics fans rather see the Warriors back in the finals so that you can beat the defending champs? And actually, to that extent, like, I wonder if the Celtics themselves, like, is there any sense in Boston of enjoying the self-immolation of the Warriors?
Look, I think one thing Boston enjoys is Draymond Green imploding. So I think there's some level of that for sure. I don't think people have looked that far ahead as far as just the general fandom, because there just is a little bit more concern about, all right, getting through to where you want to get through at this point. I really do think the Celtics blowing leads has crept so deep into people's consciousness that they're just more worried about, okay, it's almost like they're on edge. It's 2-0. We got to make sure you get that game 3. You don't want to give them any sense of life or anything like that. So but I think it would be split between wanting Golden State, saying, hey, we owe them something. And if it was Golden State, I think there'd be some level of like, all right, yeah, let's put those guys away. But at this point, I think the Celtics fans are just more like, hey, whoever. I think honestly, everybody's been conditioned to believe that Milwaukee is the biggest threat, and Milwaukee is kind of the NBA Finals. And so I think there's this general feeling of Hawks are no threat. Celtics have every matchup advantage for the most part, except for Embiid. And even then, they're the best matchup against Embiid, so they feel really good about Philly. Milwaukee is the biggest threat because Giannis, but the Celtics feel really good about that. But that's the one you're really worried about because, hey, Chris Middleton can be good and Drew Holiday is really good. And they've got the role players, and that's going to be a real battle. And I feel like after that, I think Celtics fans are like, yeah, whoever it is in the West, playoff team X from the West, whatever. Is it Denver? Who cares? Is it the Lakers? Who cares? It's none of those teams feel like as much of a threat as Milwaukee or even Philly. So I don't think anybody's focused on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's too early for it, but when the news hit near midnight last night of Draymond being suspended, and knowing you and I were talking today, and as I started just kind of cycling through where this postseason is going and all this other stuff, I did start to think like, I wonder if, would the Celtics rather want to see the Warriors again, have that rematch. But then, hey, look, there's actually a possibility, however remote, and it seems more possible now than it did a week ago, that we could have yet another Lakers Celtics finals, which
That would be something.
everyone loves another version of that, right? So that's, that would be fun. It's been what, 13 years since the last one.
Yeah. I mean, that would be something. I don't think anybody would ever turn down Lakers Celtics and one more chance to beat LeBron. That I think that's very welcome. They still sell like derogatory LeBron James t-shirts outside. I'm
shocked.
Yeah, right.
I'm shocked that Boston fans would be selling derogatory shirts of any kind about another team.
Right. The LeBron one is a mainstay. It's there. It's been there. It's a top seller. So any LeBron hate, any chance to beat LeBron is very welcome in Boston. Let's talk a little bit about Derrick White.
Yeah,
because it's funny. A year ago, at this point, it's 14 months ago. He gets traded here. There's a little bit of a question. I was just going back over a local blog post from the trade that calls it one of the worst trades in Celtics history, and it's going to be like literally, yeah. I mean, just decimated. This is going to be the worst thing. It's going to fall apart. Blah 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 blah. And now here we are, all this time later. His son is almost 1 year old. He's comfortable. He's confident, and he comes in. And I think people use the term like game changer a little too freely, but I think in this case it applies because what Derrick White is able to do, and I have to be careful because I know this is against the Hawks defense, and it's going to be different against other teams, but when you pay so much attention to Jayson Tatum, which isn't going to change, and you have to pay attention to Jaylen Brown, which isn't going to change, there are going to be open lanes for Derrick White. And the fact that he is willingly taking those and attacking those and successful at those and making good rim reads and passing out of those when his lane to the basket gets shut down. When all of that is happening and he's able to have a 26-point game, I think that is a game changer for Boston compared to last year, because that's one thing they didn't really have in last year's run. Consistently, a second guy that can create, pass, make quick decisions. And I think when you look at this year's Celtics team compared to the one that went to the finals last year, Derrick White and Malcolm Brogdon, side note, those guys, but Derrick White especially after these two games, is a real game changer for the Celtics.
It is. I mean, when you've got two guys who are as talented as the Jays are, right? You can go into almost every game feeling fairly confident that, like, we know we can score. We know we have a couple of guys who can do a lot with the ball in their hands. But you can't account for, Tatum had a kind of wonky finals, right? Those things happen. Somebody gets a little banged up along the way. Someone's got a really tough defensive matchup and it's taking them out of rhythm. It's a luxury in today's NBA where we are kind of beyond the super team era, at least for the moment. It's a luxury to have a third guy who you can point to and say, you know what, I'm not expecting it every night. He's not going to average 20, but if I need somebody else to go get me 20, 25 points, 5 assists, take on a tough defensive assignment, that you've got that guy. And Derrick White can do that. Malcolm Brogdon can do that. And when they first got I was really high on the Brogdon pickup. I don't know anybody who wasn't. That was probably, in a lot of ways a no-brainer. But a great pickup. And in part because, no, Brogdon's not like some natural scorer, not the guy you go hand the ball to and just say, just go get us a bucket. But he can. And he can have a 20, 25-point night occasionally. And we've seen it. And Derrick White's shooting has come along a long way. I don't know if you can call it sustainable yet, if it's enough of a sample size to say, like, okay, he's now a very reliable 3-point shooter. It seems to have kind of come and gone in the course of his career. But having that third guy, yeah, it's huge. It's huge for the way you can set your rotation and what you do when your stars are off the court. There's just so many options it gives you, and I think they have now, getting Brogdon, I thought, was the solution to that question. They now essentially have two of those guys because White and Brogdon both can do a lot of those things.
Yeah, the rotation part is the big part for me because the Celtics are able to play now two different ways. I think part of playoff success is taking another team out of what they comfortably do and make them do something uncomfortable. Now the Celtics have two distinct styles of play. Derrick White has been good enough this season, and because of Robert Williams' surgery that kept him out for the first half of the season for the most part, the Celtics have been playing 5 out, and they've gotten comfortable with Derrick White, and he's comfortable as a starter. But last year's playoff run involved Robert Williams as a starter, and you go double big, and he had obviously a massive defensive impact, and you can see that massive defensive impact even in game 2. But Derrick White's been good enough where you can start him in a playoff series and bring Robert Williams off the bench, and you're good. You're fine. And that changes the dynamic of what the other team's bench has to face. But also, if you need to plug Rob back into the starting lineup, they're cool with that. They can change and adapt to the matchup without getting away from something that's uncomfortable. They have two very comfortable ways to play, two very distinct different ways to play. And that, I think that's what makes the Celtics probably the championship favorite heading into these next rounds, because you want to go big, go big. You want to go small. Play 5 out, no problem. Derrick White and Al Horford hitting 3-pointers at like 40+%. Those two things especially allow the Celtics to kind of morph into, we can pull Clint Capella away from the rim. You got no help. Celtics parade, layup, points in the paint galore against the Hawks. You want to go bigger and stronger and go, shooting. You can do that. It just allows the Celtics to do a lot of different things comfortably.
There's another element to it, though. I agree with all that. There's another element too, which is that, in this league, sometimes you're forced to make these trade-offs, right? Well, we need to get more shooting in the lineup. So, whatever, let's, like the Kyle Korver type. We're going to, Kyle Korver was a better defender than probably given credit for, but I'm going to use him as the stand-in for this argument. You sometimes lose some defense when you bring in the shooter because you just needed somebody to space the floor. And then sometimes you are going the opposite direction where it's, who's the epitome of the all D, no offense, what was his face? The guy in Oklahoma for a while.
I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, who's that guy from OKC?
he was our stand-in for this prototype, right? So there are times you get a guy out there just because we need somebody to go lock down the other guy's top perimeter threat.
Tony Allen.
There we go. Tony Allen's the best version of this. And okay, now I'm giving up something at the other end. I'm giving up spacing. And lo and behold, the Warriors are going to guard Tony Allen with, Bogut and not actually guard Tony Allen at all. Right. So there's these trade-offs you have to make sometimes when you're like, man, we just need some more shooting out there. We just need some more defense. Derrick White was already going to be a guy that I think you could look to say, we need somebody else to deal with, say James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, whoever. We need some length out there. We need a defender out there. And you're not giving up anything at the other end as long as the shooting stands up and the playmaking and everything else. And so I just think it's, you talk about the lineup versatility, rotation versatility, and different styles of play. I think it's also just a matter of not having to sacrifice some piece of the game because you just needed one specific quantity, right? And so having that, this is why we talk about two-way players, why that's valuable, why it's valuable that the Celtics, 2 stars are in some measure two-way players themselves is huge, as opposed to, say, a Trae Young.
That full circle.
Look at that.
That's a professional bringing it home. I love that we talked about this team and we didn't really talk about Tatum. And Tatum's playmaking, the way he hit Horford, or Jaylen, his ability to score and hitting mid-range. Like that is such a given that it's these other things that are going to propel the Celtics to the championship that people here hope that they're going to win. Derrick White, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, Al Horford, those guys, they're the depth in their ability. That's going to be where this thing is won.
Yeah, and it's funny. Shaq likes to do his whole thing about the others when he's on TNT, and I've been hearing Shaq talk about the others for a good 26 years now, having covered those Laker teams back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was my first NBA beat. And I hate to bring a whole Lakers spiel into a Celtics podcast here, but
I can edit it all out, so don't worry about
it. Forgive me, audience. But no, when you cover a team as opposed to being there as a fan, I think there are different lessons you feel like you kind of learn from proximity. And it was one of the things that I really thought was fascinating about those Laker teams was like everybody thinks about it. Oh, well, they had 2 of the best 5 players in the league. Of course, they won 3 championships. No, there's no of course. They got to 2 of those 3 finals by the skin of their teeth. Like in 2000, they're in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals against the Trailblazers and are down 15 points in the fourth quarter. Trailblazers should have won that series. I'm not going to get into officiating controversies and conspiracy theories in 2002, but they went to Game 7 against the Kings that year, and the Kings had a deeper, overall more talented team. Again, the Lakers had the 2 best players. That game goes to overtime of Game 7 in the conference finals. Overtime of Game 7. And they're on the road. I bring that all up to say that the Lakers are a bounce or 2 away from being a one-time champion instead of a three-peat. And Shaq and Kobe were obviously critically important and foundational, but the number of times I saw Robert Horry, again, that Kings series, Vlade Divac tapping the rebound out to Robert Horry at the arc and hitting that big shot. Apologies to Kings fans who may be listening to a niche Celtics podcast for some reason, and I'm not giving them PTSD. But the clutch Robert Horry shot, the clutch Derek Fisher shots, Rick Fox's defense, all of these things, like role players are really important. Some people take offense at Shaq calling them the others. I get what he's saying. It's just another term for role players. You need high level role players. You need a guy who you don't ask him to average 25 a night, but occasionally he's going to have it. And you need guys who are going to be willing passers and defenders and who don't need the spotlight. All that stuff's important. And so that's what I like about the Celtics team a lot. Ultimately they're going to either win a championship or not based on the levels that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown reach, which they've already shown they can reach pretty elite levels, and maybe they'll go a step beyond the next time they get a chance in the finals. And at this point, I agree with you. I think they should probably be the favorites, although, never underestimate the Bucks. But whether they win or lose that series, let's project forward that the Celtics are in the finals. I guarantee you a couple of those games are going to come down to like the Derrick White game or the Malcolm Brogdon game, maybe even the Marcus Smart game, the Sam Hauser game. I don't know. But there are plenty of those examples throughout NBA history. And so I think that stuff's critically important.
Well, I like that we get to move forward and talk about all this other stuff and just be completely dismissive of the Atlanta Hawks. It's just, sorry, Atlanta, just not ready. Just not ready.
I'm not getting invited on the Locked On Hawks podcast anytime soon. I don't think. Maybe for the obituary.
I should be thanking the Hawks for winning that play-in game against Miami, because that I didn't want to face Miami. And I know the Celtics would probably beat Miami pretty easily, but considering what happened in Game 1 against Milwaukee, I'm kind of glad that the Hawks did the Celtics a favor. So, hey, there's something to be happy about here for Celtics fans and the Hawks. All right,
yay play-in tournament.
Yeah, that's right. Howard Beck and your cat. Thanks for stopping by for a few minutes here. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
Great conversation with Howard Beck. Nice to have him on a niche podcast like this. So go follow him on Twitter. Lots of great insights. He's all over the Locked On Podcast Network right now. So make sure you're checking out all of those shows. We'll definitely have him back when there's actual basketball to talk about in the upcoming series. There's really nothing to break down any further from games 1 and 2. Not on the podcast anyway. I'll do some stuff on Boston Sports Journal, but for now, this is it. This is what you see is what you get. The Hawks are terrible. I'm sorry. They're just terrible. The Celtics should roast them. I'm still giving the Hawks the benefit of the doubt for one outlier shooting game, but Celtics in 5 at worst. So again, tomorrow, mailbag questions. What's your question? Send it to me, johnkaralis.com/mailbag. johnkaralis.com/mailbag. For your questions, I will get to as many of them as possible in tomorrow's podcast. And again, Friday night, Game 3. So I'll have a post-game podcast there. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hop onto the YouTube page. Watch the show on YouTube. and get into the comment section. Make sure you're joining the conversation. Whatever you want to say, you can talk to me. You can have a comment about me, whatever you want. You can do it all there. And if you are a regular subscriber, thank you so much. Mwah, love you. And I hope you share the podcast. Tell your friends, tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.